I've been interested in VR for a while now, and I've always wanted to make my own 6 Degrees of Freedom VR setup. So today, we're gonna try. This series is a continuation of James Bruton's homemade VR series. He made a VR setup using an Arduino, a Pixie Cam, and a lot of trigonometry. He eventually got an HTC Vive though, so the project kind of ended. Today's video is episode 4 of this overarching homemade VR project, and you can find a link to the first video of the series by him in the description below. James has let me continue this project, but we're going to be taking things from a slightly different angle. Get it? Angle, trigonometry? Okay. In a minute, I'll show you the CAD of a VR remote that I've been prototyping. But before that, just so we're all on the same page, a 3 Degrees of Freedom setup like Google Cardboard is like a 360-degree video. You can rotate around, but you can't move. A 6 Degrees of Freedom setup like the HTC Vive gives you an area of space where you can literally walk around virtual objects. Through the research I've done, I've discovered that there are 3 main ways to do this, either using a gyroscope, a camera, or a lighthouse. A gyroscope setup is like using a Wii Motion Plus remote. Like I explained in my telegolf video, the controller reads the gyroscope data and rotates the virtual controller. One step further though, the gyroscope setup will also read acceleration data to try to guess how you're moving around in 3D space. However, like the Wii remote, if you make fast, jerky movements, the controller will lose tracking. So we don't want to use this for our VR setup. 1 down, 2 to go. So for the gyro method, all you needed was one device, the device you were using, to compute everything. But for these next 2, you need something called a base station. A base station is a device that's stationary in the room that is somehow linked to your VR device. For the camera method, the base station has a special camera called an infrared or IR camera that mainly just sees IR LEDs. Once we find these IR points, we can triangulate the position of the VR device. And if we do this every frame, we get 6 degrees of freedom movement. This obviously has problems since if you turn the VR device's lights away from the camera, the base station thinks it can't see the remote at all. But you can combat this by putting up another station and syncing the 2. So this plan might work, but let's take a look at the last one. Now, a lighthouse may not be something you'd expect to be used with VR, but it actually is. Lighthouses are a type of base station, and the way lighthouses work is actually really complicated. But nonetheless, I'll try to explain it simply. Here I created a hallway that I've set up with a lighthouse in the top left corner, and a Wii remote in the middle, which is going to act as our VR controller. On our Wii remote, you can see 4 gray spheres, which are acting as light sensors. First step in the process, the lighthouse bursts an IR light, telling the device to start a timer on each of its light sensors. Next, the lighthouse sweeps a laser from the top of the room to the bottom. When the laser hits each of the sensors, each timer stops. Then the lighthouse bursts another IR light, telling the remote to save each of its time values and reset their timers. Next, the lighthouse sweeps another laser, but this time from left to right. And once again, when the laser touches each sensor, it stops their timer. Then, with its new data, the VR controller can triangulate its position and rotation in 3D space relative to the lighthouse. Oh, and just a note, this whole process is done around 90 times a second. Crazy, huh? So, will it work? Yes! But it's also really complicated. It needs to be very precise. That's why I've decided to go with the camera method. And guess what? That special IR camera that I talked about is actually a Wii remote sensor. Yeah, I'm obsessed with Wii remotes, okay? Deal with it. Anyway, so using this Wii sensor, I should be able to track an object with IR lights, which brings us on to my new remote design. I use Fusion 360 to CAD my designs because it's the best CAD software. So in here, you can see my design for our VR controller. I'm not going to go deep into it this time because I still have more to design, but here's the gist. It's based off the Valve Index VR controller, and there actually was a download for a rough 3D model of their controller. But nah, I wanted to make my own. So over the past week, I've made a lot of different prototypes of the controller in order to make the tolerances just right. And to be honest, I'm really happy with it. It feels great in my hand. I love the feel of the trigger and the joystick tolerances. It's all working out really well. And this arc on the side here will be just perfect for our design for the IR lights. Speaking of which, in the next episode, we're going to be taking a look at my ideas of how to make this tracking system work And we might even have some rudimentary tracking working. So if that sounds awesome to you, be sure to subscribe. Also, if you guys have any ideas of what I could use this technology for, I would love to hear it in the comments below. Something I really want to do is turn it into a Harry Potter hyper reality setup. Maybe you could select the spell with the joystick and then cast a spell with the trigger, and then that would go into the virtual world, figure out what you're pointing at, and then tell something back in the physical world to do something. But if you guys have any ideas about that or about other things, I would love to hear it in the comments. Anyway, ladies and gents, that's it for this episode. Never be afraid to share your talent, stay awesome, and I'll see you later.